And then finally, I want to talk about one last issue that you were talking about, because District 1 is a very, very rural district. I want to talk about farming. And I know that no one ever talks about it. My dad used to be a farmer and as well. And could you talk a little bit about your farming policy? Because a lot of people just don't talk about it, but it is very integral to District 1, as well as some other things. Believe it or not, medical is very important as well, as you know, obviously, nursing. But we've talked a bit about that. But could you talk a little bit about your farming policy?
Sure. The number one thing I tell people is I'm not an expert in farming, but I'm learning. We always, up until not too long ago, we pretty much always in the family raised a couple of heads of cattle for personal use. So they went to the abattoir or butcher, whatever you want to call them. And, basically you had yourself, we divided up amongst the family, and it was fiscally responsible to do so. Mm-hmm. As the price has gone up, we have backed out of that. So in that case, that was kind of my lead-in as a kid, was, oh, well, we have cows at home. It's kind of cool. And while I don't have, the experience of somebody who's run a dairy farm for 75 years, that's my lead-in. That's how you start at the base level and build it up. Farming comes down to a couple of things. One, securing the food supply, in my opinion, is about as important as the entirety of the DoD. Mm-hmm. Because if I can't secure the food supply and I can't feed people, nothing much matters, because it's a base level necessity. Mm-hmm. We're lucky that we have a variety of some big farms in different areas. We have some orchards that are commercial and allow you to even do like you pick stuff. We have smaller farms that do CSA boxes or have farmers markets or stands. Things along those lines. It's a variety, which is nice to see. So it's not like out in the Midwest where you have a district that's just large style farming, essentially. We do have that variety, but that lets us see where maybe we need to change some legislation. When we have larger farms that are probably going to get larger and become conglomerates upon conglomerates, we further push out those middle folks. So we're talking about the larger family farms. We're talking about the heritage farms and some of the more niche farms that do the CSAs and things like that. Sure. We found in particular that sometimes the regulation needs to change. We've really delved into that when it comes to calves. Calves are basically large cattle farms, and they have a lot more waste products in one concentrated area because they have a lot more animals in one concentrated area. And there's been some talk about, do we legislate that they have to process that like you would regularly process those types of wastes? So do they have to have a processing plant? Now we can turn that processing plant into energy, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. We actually, I believe in Delaware, we already do with chicken poo. So, the technology is out there, but that's where that conversation, I would say, probably started, or at least it started for me. And then you take a look at, say, somebody who runs a smaller dairy farm, like a fantastic one that we have that does exceptional chocolate milk, eggnog, ice cream, et cetera, but they're not shipping, 5 states away with their product. They shouldn't necessarily be subject to the same restriction because the environment can hold down their level of pollutants, I guess I should call them, because that's what we're dealing with when we're talking environmentally.
Sure. Yes.
But it's a real concern, trying to find creative ways to say poo on a podcast.
I know. Well, on my podcast, you can say anything, but I know you're a candidate. So you say what you say.
Well, I'm trying to make sure that, I'm using an understandable term, but not being too clinical about it.
Right.
Yeah. So we look at that when we say, okay, so if they're subject under the same regulations, A, is that fair? B, is that making it less competitive for the smaller business? And C, is there a way to separate these two and say, if you're at this size, this is what you need to follow, and if you're at this size, this is what you need to follow? And I think that's one of the places that we're coming when we're looking at some of these areas in District 1, because we are a majority of farming. That's something that we can see a little bit more distinctly because we have the variety. The other thing we take a look at is how closely people talk about immigration and migration and illegal versions of that. People in Congress who don't want to touch anything related to our migrant workers tend to make the association vocally that the conversation is going to lead to, well, there are people who are here illegally. Yes, and we also have people who live in the United States legally who attempt to defraud the United States by working under somebody else's social security number, and they live here. So there's going to be fraud. What do we do to separate that conversation? You have dairy farmers who have the need for migrant workers year round, and they have to stagger when they send people home to make sure they're still well staffed. We have a need seasonally during the harvest seasons for different things where we get an influx of workers. And we still actually even have workers in this area who may go up and say work the mushroom farms up in Pennsylvania, but live here in the district because they're just over the line. So there's a wide variety, and we'll even see it in particularly at the beginning of the summer when crabbing season starts, because a lot of these seasonal workers come and work in our crabbing houses, and they have for many years. Clearly COVID stopped some of that, and the brakes were put on with some things, but the conversation needs to separate. And we really need to take, like I say with a lot of things, a process improvement approach. How do I get people coming back who are great workers? How do I retain them? And how, if they want to stay, how do I get them to transition into a different path that will lead to citizenship? You know, is there a way to get their previous service to our country as people who are coming in and taking jobs that other people don't want? You know, is there a way to help them transition? And some people don't want to do that at all. They just want to come up here. They want to work for their however many months it is, and they just want to go home to their family. It's just a business opportunity for them, and that's okay too. We love and respect them for that, but we need to treat them as humans. And the way we do that is by separating out that, yes, there is illegal immigration. It happens. You know, people who already live here try and defraud the government. So it's really not a surprise that we're going to get it in all sorts of different ways. But really trying to preserve that workforce for them, because the reason District 1 is so big is because we don't have the concentration of people here. They have to keep spreading that district out to get enough people to say this is a congressional district.
Wow.
Well, I'm trying to farm all this land to feed all of these people, and I don't physically necessarily have enough people in District 1 to fulfill those jobs in those seasonal positions. But like in dairy farming, people don't necessarily like those positions and might not want to be in them. So they're considered less desirable, and they're really doing us a service, these migrant workers, by coming in and helping us. I shouldn't be letting them down as part of my policy as a government. So that's another big thing with farming. I am huge into making sure that my farmers are either appropriately subsidized, as we had to with soybean farmers. When we had that tiff with China, they stopped importing our soybeans. We send a lot of soybeans to China. So what do we do with them? We found some creative ways around it. We found some different ways to store them. And then the other way is they just got composted or burned or whatnot. And then we had to subsidize the farmers because our international politics did not support them.
That's correct.
Well, that subsidy still didn't make up for what they would have made. So they were still at a loss. So a part of that is just making sure that if I'm subsidizing them, or if we're having situations like that, I'm doing it appropriately. On my website, I have this link to something that Leslie Stahl put out about how subsidies can work, and how you can have up to so many owners in a farm that may not actually be running the farm. And how it's not just the farm gets a subsidy, it's each owner in the farm gets a subsidy. So if I have a farm with 10 owners, 10 people get the same subsidy. So you get X amount of dollars, the same X amount of dollars 10 times. But this farm over here that might only have 5 owners, well, then they only get 5. This is also X amount subsidy, X amount subsidy, X amount subsidy. So that's disproportionate.
Right.
And that's significantly disproportionate, and that needs to be looked at as a process improvement. People seem to have forgotten that the government's job is kind of to do that process improvement, and if we don't have people from the ground up reminding them, they're going to continue to forget. So that's the type of approach I take. I'm actually hoping to do some training with the American Farm Bureau coming up in the next couple of weeks to help me with that. I like to think that I've got the basics down. I also really promote watching. I know this is a plug, but Amazon has not paid me for this. I want to clarify. I came across this on my own. I'm a fan of Jeremy Clarkson. My dad and I used to watch Top Gear, and then we watched, what's the new one? The Grand Tour. So when something pops up and says, hey, Jeremy Clarkson put something new out, I tend to take a good look at it. Well, this was called Clarkson's Farm. He's in the farm, but somebody else has farmed it for him. So Amazon and him got together and said, hey, let's do a show about you starting your farm from scratch. And he made, his profit was something like 127 pounds because they're in the UK. But the same thing applies, and it applies with a little bit of comedy because he's a comedic presenter, but it breaks it down pretty easily. And if somebody wants something that's entertaining but also educational, it talks about the startup costs. It talks about, okay, well, what are you working against environmentally? And the more out of swing we are with Mother Nature, and the worse storms and floods and things like that happen, the worse it is on farmers. So he kind of goes through all of that. And it's funny, but it's also very serious, because at the end he's calculating it up, and it's like, okay, you've spent all this, now how much did you make?
Yeah.
And it's a pittance.
Of course.
And then I was hoping they're going to make a second season. I don't know that they are, but a second season will be able to say, okay, you already have all this equipment. So this will be like, you know, okay, so that's how many hundreds of thousands of dollars you don't have to buy, you know, right. But what are we doing now? What does this look like as a second season? Because clearly you're not making money on the first. And if you want somebody who's going to take over a farm, or somebody who's going to start farming, you know, we need to be able to support them in that. Now, a bad business is a bad business. You can't always coach somebody into how to run one.
No,
but they have to go into it realizing that you're not going to be eating high on the hog first out. You know, there are a lot of things that you may have to take loans. You might not have to buy. You might not be able to buy equipment. You know, feed is expensive if you're raising animals. And talking about fertilizer, and it actually, in a neat package, kind of wraps up the basics. So I've been encouraging people to watch that too, though I would like to clarify, Amazon does not pay me to say that. That was just a happenstance that I came across it.
But let me tell you something. My dad, everything you're saying is my dad went through it. Like, you know, they used to get what you call accounts with southern states. Now southern states is not southern states anymore. It's now the mill. And, you know, these farmers get in hock with these companies, and this is what people don't understand. And so what ends up happening is that they have to get these grants or these subsidies from the feds. But the problem is, if they're not big enough farmers, especially the Black farmers, and this is something that I'm trying to work with Delegate Rachel Jones out of Charles. Well, she's not out of Charles, she's out of Calvert, excuse me, I said the wrong county, Calvert and Prince George's. And, you know, the thing is that they don't get enough subsidies, and many of the Black farmers have not. And I know that's a big sticking point for a lot of people, but historically they just have not, you know. And the thing is that, you know, it just, you'll end up going belly up. And it's been true for, by the way, non-Black farmers, you know, white European American farmers have had the same thing. If they're poor, if they have not been, as you said, the heritage farmers, the people who got the land trust from the king, let's just call it what it is. They were land trust farmers. Yep. And I know them because I grew up with them up in Jarrettsville. And so it's not nothing against anybody, but there's a difference between someone who has 10 to 20 acres and someone who has hundreds of acres that had them for generations. Okay. And it's not bragging or boasting. It's not one working harder or less harder. It's one having more resources versus one who has less, and one living on the edge, you know, well, I forget the song, Living on the Edge. Who sang that song? No, Living on the Edge. I don't know who, some rocker. But, you know, it's like you're living on the edge. It's like you were living on the edge constantly.
Aerosmith.
You. Boston, you know, I went to college in Boston. No wonder I'm singing Aerosmith. Man, that's my group. Okay. But, you know, and so that's how you're living your life, right? As a small Black farmer and low income European white farmers. You know, this is the thing that people need to bind together. I wish I could just get everybody together and understand this. You don't have to fight against each other. You can fight together, you know,
Yes.
and fight this fight together and band together. And you know, and not really even against the bigger farmers, because it's not a fight against the bigger farmers. It's just a fight for. And so it's so important for people to understand. I know, you know, we could talk about this agriculture thing. I know a lot of people are like, how do you know about? I know about a lot of things because I've been around a lot of things. But we could talk about that all day, but we're not. We got to move on. Okay, Jennifer, given a chance to amend the Constitution, and I know everybody try to balk on this one. If you were given a chance to amend the Constitution without interference, what would you change? And I know a lot of people try to balk from it. And the truth is, I am relatively a strict constitutionalist, but this is a complete theoretical thing. Obviously, nobody is going to go and just do this. So people don't kirk out. I'm just giving her a theoretical question. It's just a fantasy. It's just a fantasy in my mind. So what would you do if you had the fantasy? If you could, would?
Oh, this is an easy question. Equal rights amendment. For the obvious reasons. Yeah. I'm sorry, when you're clarifying something that's period contextual, so when you're clarifying something that's written in the time period, and you have to realize that the Latin base of English defaults to everything referring to a group of people in the male form, hey, that needs some clarification. We've kind of grown from that when you're talking in the vocabulary sense. So to me, an equal rights amendment is absolutely needed. And I don't think it's a dream. I think it's going to happen. That's my number one right there.
I think you're right. I think you may be right. And I think a lot of people, even a so-called constant, because this is a discussion I have with a lot of people who call themselves strict constitutionalists. A lot of them really don't understand the Constitution. A lot of them don't. What they call the Constitution is the Bill of Rights. I'm somebody, and I'm not saying this to cap on people. I think there's a lack of understanding of what is the Constitution, even the idea of the intent of the transformation of the Constitution. By the way, the Constitution was made to transform, and you know, and not necessarily easily transformational, but to be transformed over a period of time. And I think people don't understand that that's the purpose, is that it was never meant to be, we were never meant to be using that Constitution from 1700s in 20, you know, right now. It's supposed to be transforming to a certain extent so it can be adjudicated now in a different certain time. And I don't think people kind of get that, because I don't know, I think we're so great about telling other countries, no, I'm not gonna go there. You're gonna get out of that. I'm not gonna go there. But you know, I think the Constitution has a lot of beauty in it. It does. But I also think we need to be very good thinking people and understand what the founding fathers did say, because there's a lot that's said in those papers, the Federalist Papers, you know. And if you get a chance to read them, boys and girls, because I have, and I've read them several times, you'll be able to understand truly what the founding fathers really thought. And I'm telling you, they have a lot of thoughts for that small little thing called the Constitution. There's more about what they thought about it. It's in a bigger volume than what is actually written in the Constitution. And I challenge you to read the Federalist Papers, okay? So we're gonna move on before I get myself in trouble. So we're going to move on. There was a couple other questions, but I'm going to move from that because I want to move on to, even though we've talked a lot about some policies, I want to move on to your hot list. And when I say hot list, you kind of talked about some policies that you kind of had some interest in, but maybe you have some others. Do you have some other U.S. House of Representative policies that you may find that you have interest in, that you see that are out there, or even that you any other things that we haven't talked about that you think need to be presented? You know, anything that's in your head, Jennifer. Bing, 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 go.
I will say that we've kind of already covered this. I'm always interested in what they're offering with healthcare reform, in particular, what they want to do to progress towards a Medicare for all, simply because I'm only trying to make my legislation better. And since I haven't had a chance to introduce it because I don't have the seat yet, I always want to be on top of what everybody else is doing because it only makes what I'm doing better. Having said that, I also keep a very close track on the nurses that are in Congress. We only have 3, and they have very well captured amongst the 3 of them what the nursing voice can be. They just need some more backup singers, and I'm happy to do that. I'm going to put a shout out to Lauren Underwood in Illinois. I think recently everybody got introduced to Cori Bush, who's fantastic. And then 25 years approximately. So 1992 is when we had our first nurse elected to Congress, and that she's out of Texas, Edie Bernice Johnson, who is just amazing. So I always kind of keep my ear to what they're doing, just because they're always the way all of them are trying to, even Cori Bush, even though she's technically new in her position, it really takes on that process improvement concept that nurses basically build our profession on. And we have 3 different takes, but they're all working towards the same goal, and they're all extremely patient centered. So you can have all these different views. So I'm always watching them. Something else I like to do is I like to watch Delaware. So what Senators Carper and Coons are voting on, simply because if anybody's not familiar, Maryland and the Maryland-Delaware line is the spine of District 1. So anything that's happening over there is affecting me over here. And occasionally you have people who act like Delaware just doesn't exist. But the truth is we have to work with Delaware because a lot of what Delaware does affects us. Same way we have to work with Pennsylvania because a lot of what Pennsylvania does affect us, et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully the soon to be state of DC, we have to work with them. That way we can, do better for everyone because what happens there affects us. The major thing that you're going to find everywhere is I'm really interested in making sure everybody who's eligible, they have the option to vote, that they have the option to not vote. But that's why I'm so interested in HR 1. Like, I would love to see it, but I'm also interested in what else we can put out there. Personally, I'm looking for something that is essentially going to make voter registration mandatory if you're eligible. And I would love to make voter registrations a real ID. You know how we now have real ID requirements in Maryland? So when you get registered, you get a real ID, which means when you roll up to vote, I have a picture of you, I have your information. You don't necessarily need your real ID. Because if I go to motor vehicle, I mean, don't get me wrong, I could renew online with the way the process is now. But if I have to roll up there and say, hey, my house burned down with all my documents in it, or everything got stolen, I can talk to them there. They have a picture of me. I can validate the information there and the information they collect that's not on the license or the ID to facilitate me getting an ID. So they don't necessarily need stuff that I can't replace, and I'm already negotiating with getting a birth certificate or getting my passport replaced. They can literally look at it and see, hey, this is me. And I feel like that should be the way voter registration should be. And if we're going to sit here and quibble about whether or not you need an ID for voter registration, then we just make it a real ID and it's available on the computer. Plain and simple. There is no bones about it, and it cuts out all the other fog that's created around voting rights. Because the truth is if you're not winning, you probably need better candidates. And that goes for any party, that goes for any district, that goes for anywhere. So if you are, as long as you have people who are invested in the people, that is how you win. That is how you affect change, whether you're in the seat or not in the seat. So to me, I'm always looking towards how can we better secure voting rights for everybody who's eligible.
Understandable.
So that's what I look for.
All right. You didn't hit all boom, boom. Jennifer did hit some hard points. She even called me left, right with that voter ID. Hey, Jennifer's does it. She don't step back to anything, and that's okay. You know, that's the thing about it. You have to listen to everybody's point of view, and the thing about it, more importantly, she's letting you know exactly where she stands, and the truth is, it's solving some problems in the middle of it all. So we're going to the segment. Really pressing issues folks want to know. Now, this is our fun segment. So what I'm going to do is just like give you a comparison, and you're just going to say, Jennifer, you know, which one you're going to choose. Okay. So you ready? Right. So are you for, well, let me say it this way. In the last General Assembly, they voted to repeal the Maryland State Song. So would you be for or against repealing it if they hadn't? Are you for or against repealing the Maryland State Song?
Oh, it clearly needs an update. I absolutely agree with repealing it.
Okay. John Wayne's version of True Grit or Jeff Bridges' True Grit version?
Jeff Bridges.
Girl Scout cookies, Thin Mints or Samoas? Thin Mints or Samoas?
Can I pick neither and say lemon chalet creams?
Lemon chili creams?
I know, they don't even make them right now. Well, I'm allergic to coconut, so that counts out the Samoas.
Okay.
And I'm not always up for the Thin Mints.
Okay.
But any day, anytime, lemon chalet creams at the spot.
Okay, yeah, lemon chalet cream. We're gonna let you have it. Just show it, so we're gonna let you have it. Okay, all right. Since we talked about the shore, are you for replacing the Talbot Boys statue with Frederick Douglass's statue, since he was from there, or maintaining the Talbot Boys statue?
I would like to get rid of the Talbot Boys statue. I like the Frederick Douglass option, but I've heard some people say that, you know, maybe we should do more of a conglomerate of some other people. So I could be open to that, but the statue needs to go. You want to put it in a museum somewhere else? Absolutely. But given the history, I think it needs to get out of there.
And I agree with you. You know, not to belabor that point. I've heard people say you can't get rid of it. No, nobody's saying get rid of it. Let's put it in a museum. I agree with you 100%. Wings, flats, or drums?
Flats.
Oh, yes. Okay, movie.
By default, everybody else in my family likes drums. So I was rolling in flats whenever I wanted them.
Let me tell you something. I don't mind drums, but them flats, there's something about that. I don't know. It's something about it. Okay, movie. Movie character, excuse me. Benny Blanco from the Bronx or Calogero from A Bronx Tale?
I've not seen either.
Oh my God, we're gonna have to have a movie night, girl. We're gonna have to have a movie night.
I know, right?
Benny Blanco from the Bronx or Calogero from A Bronx Tale. You know that. I was born in New York, so you know that's my thing. Wilma Flintstone versus Betty Rubble. Wilma Flintstone or Betty Rubble? Betty
will take her out easy. Yep.
She probably would. You ain't lying. Kirk or Spock? Kirk or Spock?
Spock.
I like Spock too. I'm right there with you. Okay, this is going to be
Leonard Nimoy Spock. Let me be clear. Leonard Nimoy Spock.
I know, because you're right. Because I'm not sure I like the new version myself. Okay, this is going to be funny because I've been using this one for a while. Baltimore Clubhouse music or DC go-go music? Boom, boom, boom.
Oh, Baltimore Clubhouse, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. You know, I got this thing about the Braxton family. So it's either Tamar Braxton or Tony Braxton.
I'm a traditionalist, so I got to go with Tony.
Unbreak my heart.
Say you love me again.
Know it, right? I mean,
not to diminish Tamar, but
no, it is.
Tony's my woman.
But don't get me wrong. I truly love Tamar because you know what? Believe it or not, now true story. I'd have known Tamar way back in the day when she was just like the background singer and everything. So I got this thing as Tamar as the underdog. But the truth is, you gotta always pull for Tony because she, you gotta pull for Tony. Anyway, last one: Maryland crab cake at Crab City in Baltimore, or Maryland crab cake at Soul and Crab House at Chelsea's in Baltimore.
Ooh.
I know. It's like, did you eat there or not? But they both were good, I'll be honest with you.
I've eaten at both. Can I go with the crab puff at Mitchell's Crab House in Essex?
You can go with them.
I actually just recently had their crab puff and it just blew me away. I think it's Mitchell's. It's the crab house in Essex that's famous for the crab puffs.
That's all right.
I have to say, because of that, I've moved from crab cakes to crab puffs. I'm not gonna lie.
That's okay.
I've actually tried to make them at home unsuccessfully, but
can't even make it home. So Jennifer, we've had a great time, man. I think we did hit everything. Is there anything that you want the people to know that I think I touched a little bit of everything. Is there anything you think that I haven't touched that you want to just hit the people with going out?
No, just simply that my campaign is starting from talking to everybody. It's the way I did it last time. It's the way I'm always going to do it, because I don't feel that I should be just running in the Democratic ticket right now. What I should be doing is I should be running a race against Andy Harris. So it's a different approach. So you'll see that I'm talking to Republicans. You will see that I have signs in Republican yards. And that's because I'm playing the long game. I feel like if I'm going to be me, and if I were just to talk to Democrats, I'd have to cut off most of my family, and I really like them. So to me, it's unfair to try and cater to one side and then turn around and ask the other side for votes. So you get me as I am. You get me derby car lady. You get me, Spock fan. You get me as a nurse. You get me how I am this way. There's no catering. There's no. I'm going to say to this side one thing and say to this to the other, because I am not a professional politician. I am a professional negotiator and a professional advocate. And I think that's what we really need to take this seat from the person who currently has it, because he has it not just because the way it's shaped. He has it and he holds on to it whether Republicans like him or not, because they're scared of not having somebody at the federal level to go to. So one of the things I'm hoping to establish also by, cornering him at the Cecil County Fair and being like, hey, I need your help on this, is that I feel comfortable advocating at his office already. And I feel comfortable going up to him in public. God forbid, without my notes, somehow I managed through it and he understood what I was talking about with the problem. But I want him, if I take the seat over, to understand that he can send people to me in my office. And it's that comfort level is something that nurses, who I'm proud to be part of 19 years and running the most trusted profession, that we can parlay that. Because I think no matter how drastic you've gerrymandered a district, if you get the right candidate, I'm not saying I'm going to win by a huge landslide. I'm not going to win by 90-some%. But I'm going to be able to speak to people on both sides and be saying I've been doing that from the beginning, and you can't accuse me of catering to one party and then turning around and being two-faced about it. And that's also a little different approach that you haven't seen very much of with previous candidates. They focus so much on the primary they're running in, but I'm running out here. I'm running in the general already in my mind. And I think that's the only fair way to do it. And I would like to hope that everybody is adopting that. As a policy, because you don't want to get into that, well, you said this over here, you've turned around and done this. If that's the truth, and you should be able to say, I learned information. This is what I learned to change my position or to adjust, how I perceive things. It shouldn't be, I took this position, now I'm changing it because I need to get the votes from the Republicans. You just need to be you. And I think that's, some people have gotten that, some people are getting better at it, and that's just the way I see everything anyway. So that's just me. Thank you.
Awesome. That's just Jennifer Pingley. Pingley's politics, y'all. Pingley's politics. Politics. That's right. Anyway, thank you, Jennifer, for coming on and letting us know a lot about you, because I didn't know a whole lot. And to be honest with you, when I don't know a whole lot, I got to ask questions. And I appreciate you taking your time and letting all my people know, because my people love to know new information. And the voters in your district, I have a, believe it or not, quite a big base in one that will be looking and responding to all the information they've heard about you. And so thank you, people. We're gonna sign off for Beach Politics. Beach Politics. Beach